Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Grace Holland. The Republican National Committee is off and running with several headlines coming out of the first day. Former President Donald Trump officially became the nominee and named Senator J.D. Vance as his running mate, all against the backdrop of an assassination attempt over the weekend. WRAL State Government reporter Will Doran joins us to talk through what we need to know heading into day 2 of the convention. Will, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Grace.
So let's start with that vice presidential pick. There were a few different people that were in the running on the short list. So who is Senator J.D. Vance, and what do people need to know about him?
Yeah, so Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio, he's a Republican. He's actually brand new to the U.S. Senate. He's only been in for about a year or so. He actually was formerly very anti-Trump. There had been some messages surfaced that he said Trump is possibly America's Hitler. He said anyone who votes for Trump is an idiot. But he has since come around and bent...
An understatement?
Yes. Just a bit. He's bent the knee, become very loyal to Trump since all of these very negative statements in the past. And, Trump is the kind of person who appreciates that. People coming up to him and saying, I was wrong, I support you now, I respect you now. And Vance has been, very much... in favor of leniency towards people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, calling them political prisoners. This is something we see at a lot of Trump rallies. Like, I go to these and they'll, show videos of a lot of people in prison for the January 6th stuff, and Trump calls them political prisoners too. So they're very much aligned on, those sorts of issues. It's very much doubling down on the Trump base, not really going for a pick that broadens the appeal of Trump to maybe more moderate voters. It's very much doubling down on his base of support and really trying to energize Trump supporters to make sure that they are Trump voters.
Yeah, seems like a very different VP pick from Mike Pence, which we saw obviously in 2016. So what has the reaction on the left and the right been to Vance as the running mate, and have we seen any reaction here in North Carolina?
Yeah, Our junior U.S. Senator Ted Budd came out pretty much immediately and said that he's a big fan of Vance, can't wait to vote for him. We've seen similar reaction from a lot of other Republican politicians here, and I'm sure from our Democratic politicians we'll hear plenty of criticism.
Right, and so what is the general plan for the RNC as we move through the week?
Yes, so it is going to be days of speaking. We're going to have speeches today, more speeches Wednesday, more speeches Thursday. Obviously, the big thing that most folks want to see is the Trump speech, and that is happening on Thursday evening. He'll be addressing after formally getting the nomination to be their nominee for the presidency. But there are dozens of people who were picked to speak in the days between then, and that includes politicians, it includes business people and donors, it includes political activists and celebrities, and then some people who are just billed as regular folks. If people remember the UNC frat bros who put the American flag back up, they'll be speaking. North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson spoke last night. We also have plenty of other people with North Carolina ties. Michael Whatley, who's now the head of the RNC, former head of the NCGOP, he'll obviously be speaking and be seen a lot there. Linda McMahon, the former wrestling executive, who's a Eastern North Carolina native, it has a speaking spot. Franklin Graham, of course, from preaching royalty here in North Carolina, will be speaking as well. So there's going to be a lot of focus on North Carolina, which makes sense because we are a key swing state.
All right, let's take a quick break right there, and we'll be right back. Well, before the break, we were talking about the RNC and what's going on this week. But all of this is happening, as I said in the intro, after what happened over the weekend with the assassination attempt at the Trump rally. So what has that meant for security at the convention? Obviously, we have North Carolina delegates who are there. So what have they told us about what they're seeing?
I would imagine Milwaukee is probably just about the safest place in America right now.
Yep. Usually after something like that, yeah.
Yeah. We've heard from several members of the North Carolina delegation or just, fans who are in attendance up there who have been to a few conventions like this in the past that security does seem a lot tighter. The official word from the Secret Service is that nothing changed after the attempted assassination, that, all the plans were still going through. Obviously they want to say that, oh, well, we already had the perfect plan in place, so we didn't even need to change anything. But what we've heard from people who are on the ground is that security is very tight, much tighter than, for example, in 2016 in Cleveland. We've heard from several people who were at that convention that security seems a lot stricter and tighter this year. And it could also be that there are plenty of protests as well. And a lot of those protesting organizations have said that even despite the shooting, they're not going to call off their plans to be protesting against Trump. And they're expecting thousands of people to attend the convention, as well as thousands of protesters. So it is going to be quite the scene for the police to handle up there.
Right. And once we move past the convention, obviously the DNC will have their own plan and everything. But at some point, we're going to start seeing campaign stops again. Obviously, many of those have already been here in North Carolina now with a VP pick on the Republican side. He'll probably make some stops here along with Trump and Biden and Harris as well. So how are we expecting this assassination attempt to affect future campaign events, if at all? As someone who, as you said, you've been to those kind of events before.
Yeah, we are going to be seeing a ton of these candidates. I mean, in 2020, it felt like, the last few months of the campaign, they were here. Either Trump or Biden, or sometimes both, was here weekly. I mean, it was just a constant deluge of visits, and I would imagine we're going to get the exact same thing again this year. And for folks who are going to want to be going to those rallies, no matter which side of the aisle you're on, definitely expect more security, probably longer lines, longer waits, just because it's going to be so much more of a focus right now. And, the last few Trump rallies, Biden rallies I've been to, security has been kind of all over the place. So, we in the media don't always go through the same entrances as people in the public.
Right.
Sometimes they like to screen, the big bags and cameras and stuff that the media is taking in a little bit more closely. They'll bring in the bomb sniffing dogs to make sure no one's trying to, disguise a bomb as a camera or anything like that.
Right.
So it is pretty strict security, but it can definitely vary depending on the venue and depending on, a lot of times, just frankly, how much of a notice the local cops got. Do they have 2 weeks to make sure that all of their folks were not going to be on vacation and could be around to shut down the roads? Or do they only get told about the rally a day or two ahead of time by the campaign? So a lot of it sometimes is the campaigns who just don't tell the police or the local police ahead of time very far where they're going to be going. And that obviously creates headaches for local law enforcement. But yeah, I definitely expect much stricter security going forward here in North Carolina, even if that means, pulling in law enforcement officers from surrounding counties when they need to.
All right. Yeah, it'll definitely be something to watch, especially as we learn more about that investigation. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Will.
Thank you.
Also, on Monday night, President Joe Biden gave a sit-down interview with NBC's Lester Holt as he switches back into presidential campaign mode after the assassination attempt on Trump.
Well, let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat on a call a week ago. You said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there was very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term is bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. There's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said, I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying and, the idea.
Biden also spoke about his decision to stay in the race, despite calls for him to step down due to his age. He pointed out he's only 3 years older than Trump and says he will stay in. Thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. Another great way to get WRAL news is the Morning Briefing newsletter. It's a daily email that's waiting in your inbox every morning with local news, events, and headlines to get you ready for the day. Sign up at WRAL.com/newsletter.